Hello, hello, Dr. Sarah, your brain gal here. I'm excited to come to you live. I'm excited that I'm able to come to you live because I have had computer problems and one thing after another today. So I'm finally excited to be here. So excuse the backdrop, excuse the fact that I have my headphones in, but I showed up for you. So hopefully you guys can come join me today. And I was actually going through a lot of the questions that I get often. And I wanted to talk today about different family structures and raising little brains with different family structures. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do and how to raise brains if your household looks a little bit different than some other people. So, I come from a divorced household and I am co parenting with a wonderful partner, and we both have co parents, and that often creates different kinds of situations. And when you're parenting on your own in a household, it also creates a little bit of a different situation. And so you have to learn to parent a little bit differently. So, I'm going to first talk a little bit about that process of divorce and what that looks like. I get a lot of questions about what do I do when the kid's father is doing something I don't like and I have to deal with it. I have a narcissistic ex or an ex that treats the kids poorly. What do I do? Or sometimes it's just a matter of things are being done differently than I would do them, and what do I do about that? So I'm going to talk a bit today about how do you raise brains with that family structure in that way. So the first thing is that when you are at the beginning of a divorce, there are a lot of emotions going around, a lot with your kids and a lot with you. And so the best advice that I give to parents at this point in time is to learn to pivot. So you thought your lives were going in one direction and now they're taking a slightly different turn. This is true for whether you're getting a divorce, whether you've had a death in the family, whether something you thought for example, when I lost kids, that's also, you think your life is going in one direction, changes. When we have a pandemic, all of these things need, increase our need to be able to pivot. And when we're going through a very emotional time, again, could be divorce, could be a death in the family, could be any kind of traumatic event where you think your life is going in one direction and you take a quick turn. Don't be as scared of those deep emotions. Allow yourself to feel them and be accepting and understanding of those things for yourself, first of all. You want to keep the really big emotional reactions, the ones that you really have trouble getting back that you can't control. Keep those away from the kids as much as possible in order to help them understand that things are going to be okay. But don't be afraid to show some emotions. You want to find ways of getting yourself back. If it's divorce, that can be reinventing yourself. That can be starting to think about what makes you happy and not your ex unhappy or somebody else in your life unhappy. So you really want to focus on you, and you want to make sure that your kids have an understanding of the fact that you are learning how to pivot, how to change, how to find yourself again, because that model of finding yourself is what's going to be helpful for your kids. And hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're talking a little bit about how to raise brains with a divorced household or with a household that looks a little bit different than just the traditional nuclear family. So the first one is learn to pivot, learn to feel those emotions, the big ones away from your kids, but some in front of your kids, and make sure that you help your kids understand that this is a process, that you're working to find yourself. You're working to find yourself, you're a way to make you happy, not other people unhappy. So that's the first big one. The second one is going to sound a little harsh, especially if you're newer in the divorce world. It's often can shock some moms that I work with, but um, learn to let go. And what I mean by that is there are going to be things in your children's lives that you can't control. This is true for my divorced moms as it is for really any mom, that there are going to be scenarios in school, there are going to be scenarios at another household, with friends. If you have teens, this is a big one. You want to learn to let the control of that go because there are going to be things in the world they can't control. I mentioned this earlier in the live, but when I lost my children, I could not control those things. Those bad things happened to me when we had a pandemic and everything shut down. That's something that you can't control. So treat the other household, treat the things that you're having difficulties managing with your children as something you can't control. So in the divorce scenario, think about the things happening, if you're a mom, the things happening at dad's house, if you're dad, the things happening at mom's house as the things you can't control. If you do that, then the way that you're actually helping to raise your little brains is you're now running a supportive role. You are helping them process emotional reactions, process things that happen to them, and you are helping to build those little brains, those skills in those little brains, not trying to keep them from things that are happening at that other house. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this rule. But in general, you really want to help your kids through those emotional reactions and start to use these things that we can't control as learning experiences and teaching experiences. What does that little brain need to learn? What can I teach this little brain in this scenario? And try to keep the bias that you're going to have, the emotional reaction that you're going to have, because anything involving our kids and anything involving an ex-spouse is going to have that emotional reaction. Treat it as this thing that you pull to the side and you focus really specifically on helping your kids through what they need to do. So you are going to ask a lot of questions. How does that make you feel? What could you do? What if you did this? Give them advice you would give a really good friend or somebody, or really maybe even a niece or nephew, and try to pull out your own emotional response to help them run that interference. So learning to let go and accepting that situation as something you can't control is going to help you make this shift in the way you're thinking about parenting and thinking about raising those little brains to really allow that growth for them. Because now we're building some independence. Now within that, we still want to validate their feelings, right? I don't believe in not discussing things with your children. You may discuss them with your children, but keep it at an age appropriate level and keep the response something that, again, you're running this supportive role, validating that feeling and helping them figure out what to do about it. And the key to being able to do this is to really believe in your ability to parent. If you're watching this, if you're in the community, you're seeking some support, that's all a good sign. So you can do this and your kids will understand and recognize that. So you really want to make sure that you believe that you can create these relationships with your kids. And creating a relationship with your kid doesn't mean that they don't have a relationship with other people, right? So just keep your relationship strong and help to guide your kids through these things. And the last one is to really, of course, love your kids and advocate for your kids, but not at your expense and their own expense. And what I mean by that is we do want to validate those feelings. We do want to help them understand what's happening with them, but we can't save them from every single thing either. So you want to pick and choose your battles with that and help them learn how to work through scenarios that you may not like or things that you may not see the value in them doing. So you can try to give them suggestions and try to figure out how to help them help themselves instead of, again, swooping in and saving. So the first is to get really good at pivoting your life, trying to figure out how you can make yourself happy, how to help your kids make yourself happy. Learn to let go, recognize that there are these things that you just cannot control and that are going to happen to the kids. And as much as you want to save them from those things, you're going to help their little brains grow even better if you can help them learn how to deal with things themselves. I'll give you an example, right? Let's say there's a lot of yelling and screaming at the alternate house. That's not something that you love. That's not something the way that you want to parent. Maybe even that's not, what your kid's exposed to. You may not be able to stop the yelling without more yelling. But what you might be able to do is help them figure out some strategies for what could you do to remove yourself from that scenario a little bit, or to be able to go to a different room. Could you play with friends? Could you talk to that parent about how you feel? These are all questions that you can ask your kids to try to help them run. If they can't do anything, sometimes just being able to help them figure out how to think about that scenario differently will be helpful to them, that it's not their fault, that this is something that's happening with someone who might not have great skills but might still love them, and you can work through those things in that way. So when you have this experience of this initial divorce, it's really important to help through it. Now, over time, hopefully some of those big, strong emotions and your own emotional reactions will go down. The next issue that we tend to have with single moms or with a one parent household is that it's harder to parent like a good cop bad cop style, right? And so you have to be both good cop and bad cop. And in order to do that, you really have to work with your kids in developing goals and things that they want to meet, because it's much harder to have them for a few days and still be able to send them to their room and still be able to create a good relationship with them and have, spend some time with them. You can't, for example, send them to their room 10 minutes before they leave to go to the other house, because they're only going to be in there 10 minutes, then they're done. You can't ground them for a weekend that you don't have them. And so if you don't have a good co-parent to work with, and even if you do, you really have to start to come up with goals for the kids that they want to meet together, that you're working on together. And when they don't meet them, those consequences really have to be different. So you need to come up with some alternative ideas, some, you know, reducing time at your house, maybe on electronics might work one day, but it may not work the other day if they're switching houses. So kind of thinking through what kinds of things that you can do to help your kids really learn better skills is going to be key. And I'm saying learn better skills for a reason, right? Because everything we do to approach our kiddos is to learn skills. So if you want to talk more about single parent households and how do you manage that good cop and bad cop at the same time, if you're a full single parent household, you may have some time to give consequences. If you are co-parenting where kids go back and forth, you either have to work together really well, or if you aren't able to work together well, you really have to figure out some alternative um, solutions to those issues, which means coming up with a list ahead of time of both things that your kids can earn with you and things that they can lose with you. So you can think about those things. Money sometimes is a good one. Time can be a good one, but time is tough because there could be a long break in between. You kind of want some more immediate consequences. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on what you use. You can definitely comment below. And just there's a huge recognition of the fact that there is not a book on this, that we have to talk through this, that divorce can be tough on families, that you really do have to shift the way that you think about raising your kids. And the number one suggestion that I can give you again is learning to pivot, is learning to let go and to run a supportive role with your kids. And then, of course, to love your kids and to advocate for them, but step back and make sure you're not advocating for your emotional reaction. Make sure you're really strongly advocating for what the kids need, and not what they want, but what they need. And then helping them learn the skills around advocating for themselves. Help your kids learn how to express how they feel. That is one of the pros of being able to help run supportive roles. They're going to become much more independent in these things. So that's my little live today on divorce. We're going to talk a little bit more about them. Remember, I go live on Instagram on Fridays at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So we'll talk a little bit more about specific tips of things that you can do to help raise your kids with happy, healthy, connected little brains. So thanks for joining me today, and I will see you next week.